Thanks for joining us at Church Experience Online. If you'd like to learn more about the church, get connected to our community, or help fuel the movement by giving, just check out the link to our website in the description below.
Let's Marvin Gaye and get it on. You got that healing that I want. Just like they say in the song. Until the dawn. It's Marvin Gaye, get it on, babe. Let's Marvin Gaye, get it on. Just like they say in the song. Until the dawn. Let's Marvin Gaye, get it on.
Used. That's the title on the top of your notes there, on the back side of that handout we gave you on the way in, the weekly. And if you'd like to write down a definition of what I mean by used, let me give that to you. But here's where we're going. We're in this series, Oversexed and Underloved, and I think a lot of people feel used when we think of being underloved. I think people are used often in the area of sex, in the area of relationship. Happens all the time, so let's get into it. In your notes, using someone is this. It's taking advantage of or manipulating for personal gain. It's taking advantage of or manipulating for personal gain. It's a great source of people feeling underloved, and it happens all the time. You think about some of the reasons why people get used. People might use others for their brain. They might use others for their body, for their abilities, what they can do for them. People get used because they say yes all the time, and others take advantage of that. Some people get used because they're taken for granted, maybe a spouse or parents, these kind of things. Sometimes people get used for something they own, for someone else's self-promotion or status. Sometimes people get used so that others can get ahead, or because they're financially beneficial for someone. Sometimes people get used because of their work or their occupation, because of physical, sexual pleasure, because of an emotional high that someone might get. Someone might get used to meet someone else's needs, or for many other reasons, people get used. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. People get taken advantage of. The root of this is self-interest. Why does that happen? It's because of self-interest instead of God's interest in another person. Philippians chapter 2, verse 21 is a really interesting verse here that very succinctly captures this idea. Philippians 2:21, it says, "For everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ." For everybody looks out for their own interests. Everybody just help me out and just say, get yours. Come on, say, get yours. That's kind of the culture we're in, right? Is that you get yours. You take care of yourself, take care of your own interests, and that's just what you got to worry about. There's not enough hours in the day to even do that, so don't worry about anybody else. Certainly not Christ's interests. The Bible tells us that this is how the way the world operates. But if I can help us see how different our approach to relationships should be compared to the way of the world, or the way the Bible calls our flesh, our human nature. It'd be like this, and I don't know what computer you use during the week, but it would be like this. It'd be like getting a new operating system. So it'd be switching to whichever one you think is better, from PC to Mac or Mac to PC, whatever your preference. It'd be like upgrading to a different, or in your mind, better operating system, a totally different system by which you run, the platform on which you run your life. And you come into the world, you run a certain kind of operating system, and things function a certain way. And that way that things function, the operating system is this, is get mine and take care of me. Do what I got to do to take care of myself, and that's how we tend to operate. Right? And if it comes down to it, this coming week, if maybe God's word is not guiding you like it should, and maybe if you're not on track like you should be, I mean, if it comes down to it and there's pressure in your life, who are you going to take care of? For most people, the answer is themselves. They look out for their own interests. Instead of giving, it's getting. Instead of serving, it's serving self-interest. It's about what's in it for us. And because of that, those we care about are often underloved. And so if we want to help change this current in our culture of people feeling underloved, we have to go after this interest, this self-interest of using others to our advantage. Seeing people for something that only benefit ourselves. Using people happens all the time, and sometimes It happens simply for our own entertainment, that we use people. That's good. And you should feel horrible for laughing right now. It's so common in our culture, isn't it, that, it's okay for us to take advantage of somebody if it's in our interest. And this is lighthearted and fun, and there's no damage done here. But man, we don't hesitate. We don't flinch to get ahead ourselves if it disadvantages someone else. It doesn't bother us in our culture because we are so interested in what's going to benefit us instead of what is in the best interest, and ultimately, and most importantly, what's in God's interest for that other person. See, when you start to follow Christ, it tells us in Corinthians that the old is gone and the new is come. And so what it's saying is that old operating system is gone, the new operating system has come. There's a better way of operating your life, a more fulfilling way to operate your life, a different way. And it's not about what you get, it's what you give. It's how you live your life for God's interest in this world and for the betterment of the world and betterment of others. If you're a people user looking out for your own interests instead of what God's interests are in the lives of others, I think there's a story in the Bible that will help us. And so let's jump into it. It's talking about love. And so this is probably one of the greatest love stories in the Bible, certainly in the Old Testament part of the Bible. It's a story of God's love and his relationship, his companionship that he formed with a man named Abraham who had a son named Isaac. And Isaac had a son named Jacob, and God changed his name to Israel, and his children became the tribes of Israel that you read so much about in the Bible that allows us to have a peek into, a glimpse into how God works with humanity. We learn so much from their story. You read the great stories of their ups and downs throughout the Bible. But this began with the family. It began in relationship. And Abraham had a son named Isaac, and he passed God's blessing on to him, and then Isaac has these sons, Jacob and Esau, and they come out together. They're twins, and Esau comes out first. He's technically the older brother, and his younger brother, Jacob, comes out holding onto his heel and grabbing onto it, and that's part of his name. And the one who grabs, this Jacob, the deceitful kind of grabbing at his brother kind of thing, and this is his reputation. And Jacob ends up going on to be the one that God blesses in a greater way. And it's his name that goes on to be changed to Israel and develops into so much of what God does in the Bible. So it's his story I want to look at, because every person has a story. They have parts where they really shine, and then they have some low parts of their story. And we want to look at some of the low part of Jacob's story. It's how he actually gains his father's blessing. Genesis chapter 27, verse 1. It says, when Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and he said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. And Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like. Bring it to me to eat so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Well, Jacob and Esau's mother overhears this conversation, and she goes to tell Jacob what's going down. The older brother is about to be blessed by your father, and Jacob was always her favorite. And they had been told, they knew of what God said when they were born, that the older will actually serve the younger, and so this is really somehow part of God's divine plan. But she went and she told Jacob what was going on. The father's blessing was about to be transferred on, and so they work up this plan. In Genesis chapter 27, verse 19, Jacob has gone out and he's, with his mother's help, tried to deceive his father. Verse 19, Jacob comes in and he says to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." And with his mother's help, father can no longer see. He's disguised himself, put on his brother's clothes. Very elaborate, if you read the whole story, everything that he's gone to, the lengths he's gone to deceive his father. But to trick his father into giving him the blessing instead of his brother. So Esau finds out what's going on once the blessing's already been transferred. The blessing is transferred down from Isaac to his son Jacob. It'd be kind of like signing over the inheritance. It'd kind of be signing over like, yeah, this is going to be the one to lead the family kind of thing, and all this. And there's a spiritual side of it, but it's all been passed on to him. And this is the response of Esau, verse 35. Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright." Previously in the story, he'd been deceived again, and now he's taken my blessing. Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Speaking to his father. Verse 37, Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, and have made all his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" So Jacob deceives Esau, his brother. He gets the blessing of his father Jacob, and Esau is angry about this. But it went through. It happened. It was done. And he was taken advantage of. In your notes, I would love to have you write this down. Using breaks relationships. Giving makes relationships. See, Jacob used the situation to his own advantage. He used his father's weakness. He exploited it so that he could get something for himself. The fact that his brother was away, he used that to his own advantage. He tricked, he deceived. The how-to of relationships and what you just wrote down there. Using versus giving. How to break relationships and help the people you care for feel loved? You give. You give to them. How you have bad relationships and how they break down and how they get ruined is that you take, that you use people for your own advantage. How are you doing on this? In your relationships, would people say you're more a giver, or would they say that you're a taker? Would they say you're a giver, or would they say you're a taker? Because the results are in the second half of what you just wrote down. Using breaks relationships, and if you're a people user, then your relationships are probably breaking, and if you're someone who's a giver, then your relationships are probably being made, they're probably being built up. I try to do something fun and adventurous with my boys each week. My two oldest of our kids are boys, and I try to go out and spend some guy time with them, and I feel like they need that time for dad, so we'll go out and try to do something fun and get our energy out and just play. And so this last week, what we did is we went to the Philippi Park down at Safety Harbor, and in the back part of the park, there's these big rock structures that they've made out of cement. And they attached them together with ropes, and they love to climb. In fact, that's a huge understatement. If you know my boys, like, they love to climb. Like, they're all about that. And so we were climbing around together, just having some good father-son time. And there's one particular section between these two big rocks where there's this rope that does this X shape, and it's really hard to navigate from one side to the other. And so me and Jalen, with a lot of effort and energy, we finally make it across to the other rock, and Jalen's perched up on top. And we're waiting for Kylan, and he tries a few times, and every time he doesn't make it, he's telling himself he has to start over. We're like, hey, just start there. And he's like, no, I got to start at the beginning. And so he climbs up over the rock. We wait a few minutes. He gets to that spot and doesn't make it, so he starts over, and he tries several times. And we're starting to cheer him on. We really want him to get across. We're like, come on, man, you can do it. And Jalen, his older brother, decides he's going to coach his younger brother and help him conquer this this fear, this challenge. And out of all the different words that I've given him over the years of his life, the 8 years of his life, all the different inspiring quotes, all the Bible verses, right? All the different things that could have been in his mind in that moment to help his brother. You don't want to know who he quoted? He quoted Yoda. From Phantom Menace, Star Wars. He's like, hey, Kylan, remember what Yoda says? Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to death and the Sith. That's exactly what he said, just like that, from the top of the rock. I'm like, out of all the Bible verses that you memorized, Yoda. You know, it was a cool moment. It was, because here's the one brother trying to help the other one, and he finally made it. It was a cool moment for us all, but he wanted him to win. He wanted him to win. He's like, I'm for you. You know, as our hearts change and mature in Christ, and as Jesus changes us, our hearts become different. It's not about like, we win. You know, that's not our main ambition in life. That's what the flesh, and that's how we come into the world. It's about, but it changes and something becomes different, and we want to see God's agenda win. And we want to see God's agenda win in other people's lives. Even if it's not to our advantage, we want to see God do what he wants to do in someone else's life. We want to see them raised up. We want to see them blessed. And we pray for me. I pray for you guys every week. You know, and if I have like something going on in my life and it spurs and I'm praying for something in our family, if someone's sick, I'll just kind of throw the blessing on you guys. Like, God, I pray that whoever would feel better. God, I pray for people at church experience. They feel better. And I hope you guys will start doing that kind of thing too. You got a financial pressure you're praying about in your own family. God, help us to meet the bills. You know there's someone else that's going through that too. So just pray. God, be with our church. You know, pray for your friend. And what it does is you start to pray for others. It gets your mind thinking about others and not just your own, because you got your own story. I mean, no question. You got challenges. You got hardships. You got things you're going through. I know that's true. But did you realize that everyone else has those things going on too? In fact, one of the other songs, I love the new song that was shared today. One of the other songs that we wrote recently, it's called Overcome. And we're going to do a teaching series on it after Easter. We're really looking forward to this. Talking about overcoming the battles, the storms, and the mountains that we all face. And we're going to talk about how we all face different battles, storms, and mountains, but we all face them. We all have these challenges in our lives. And as you mature in the Lord, you start to look at other people with different lenses. And you start to see, you know what? Their challenge is my challenge too, because we're on the same team. And I want to see God win in their life. I want God just to win in my life. That's where you start. You come to know Jesus, and you're like, all right, God, I need your help in my life. Can you help me? Here's my problems. Here's where I need your strength, and I want you to be in my life, and it's about you and God, and that's great. But then as you mature in life, your eyes start to get open, and you're like, man, there's a bigger story here. It's not just about me. It's about God's kingdom. It's about what he's doing in other lives. And that's such a fun place to get to. Because then you look around and you see opportunity for God to get glory all over the place. And you see opportunities in relationships, and everything looks different because it's not this isolated, narrow, lonely view of self that we all had at one point. But God opens your eyes and you think, man, this is awesome. I get to be on God's team. I get to kind of like, I once was laying in the hospital bed and I needed the doctors and nurses, and now I get to be on the healing team. I get to go around and God gets to work through me, fly me to help lift others and to encourage others and to build others up. And I want God to win in others' lives. And it's just the whole operating system changes. Everything's different. So in your life, do you go through Monday to Sunday, week to week, do you go through just focused on your agenda, or are you focused on God's agenda? Jacob here, he takes advantage of his brother, and it really ruins the relationship at this point in their lives. Genesis 27, verse 41, notice Esau's reaction. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near. So my dad's days are short. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. So Jacob is on the run, and he flees to Laban's home, far away, separated from his brother by many miles. See how using people separates relationships? His brother literally wanted to kill him when he had the opportunity. I mean, when you use someone to your own advantage, it breaks the relationship. It causes pain, and people feel so underloved because they feel so often used. An example might be a woman feeling used by a man who wanted sex from her and not a relationship. Could be a woman taking advantage of a man by seducing him in through the allure of physical pleasure because she was in need of something perhaps emotionally, just as an example. It might be a great business opportunity. You know, there's great business opportunities out there. There's people who are aggressive and they're trying to make a name for themselves, they're trying to make a career, or they're trying to achieve financial goals, and in a lot of ways, nothing necessarily wrong with that. In fact, there's a lot of great business opportunities out there. This is as of January this year, 2016, Apple sold an average of 34,000 iPhones per hour, 24 hours a day for 13 consecutive weeks. There's a lot of business being transacted. Amazon Prime now has 54 million Prime members. Same-day shipping now, all stuff. I mean, there's a lot of business happening. There's a lot of transactions taking place in our world. But there's some business opportunities that exploit people and exploit relationships. And I just challenge you to be cautious in any opportunities you get to leverage people for your gain, whatever that may look like. And God will lead you in what that looks like. But be someone who gives and not someone who takes. Because people can almost smell that. It's like an intuition that God's given us. When you sense that someone's in your life for what they can get out of you, you just know that. But then on the other hand, it's so cool, and you see this in believers all the time, like people, when you can tell that they're in your life to lift you. And that they don't want something from you, they want something for you. And that's what I love about God, is that God ultimately does not want something from you, He wants something for you. And He's a God that is for you. And He's on your side. And I love that about Him. And giving, it builds relationships. So are you someone who pours fuel into others? Think about it week to week, through your actions, through your words. Are you someone that pours fuel into others, or are you someone who drains others? What do you bring to your relationships, to those you care about? I wonder what it would take to change that, to where if we ask people around you, are you a giver or taker, they'd say, you know what, they're a giver. I feel bigger when I'm around them. I feel better about myself when I'm around them. I'm encouraged when I'm around them. They do what they can to help. Be that kind of person. So maybe you're where Esau is at, and he's been burned, he's been used. So maybe you're on the flip side of it, and you've been used, and you're feeling underloved. You need some relief, right? What relief does God offer? What help does God offer when people take advantage of us all the time? How do you protect yourself? How do you live this kind of outward giving lifestyle and serving and loving others when people it's like, Brandon, I don't want to give because I've tried that before and I got taken advantage of. So exactly what you're telling me not to do myself, that happens to me every time I put myself out there and try to be for others. I realize that they're for themselves, and so I'm just advancing someone else's agenda. How do we figure all this out? And, well, in your notes, there's a couple things God offers. Forgiveness protects us from the aftermath of being used. Forgiveness protects us from the aftermath of being used, and healthy boundaries protect us from being reused. Esau had some forgiving to do, and maybe you do too, because maybe you have been used. It was Lorenzo Brown who said, pursuing revenge will only lead to more destruction in your life and in the lives of others. You'll find it hard to move ahead if you don't go back and forgive. Maybe you've been wounded, used in some way, and this very word, this very title of this message, it almost causes you to cringe because you've been there and you've been used. Well, until you go back and forgive and release and surrender that to God, let that go. That bitterness, it's like a corrosiveness inside of you. You ever opened up something like an old remote control that had like a battery inside, and you realize that corrosive stuff kind of like eked out of the battery and been in there too long, and that little white corrosive. It's like that's what's going on in your soul when you refuse to forgive. It's like this growing corrosiveness inside of you that just will destroy you over time. You have to let that go. And you're allowing them to continue to hurt you as long as you harbor that bitterness. So you gotta release it. This is for your good. And if you're still in a relationship with them, then that's the only way that you can move forward, is to forget to let go. But this is something God wants for you to forgive. He says, forgive and you'll be forgiven. I've forgiven you. Whoever has been forgiven much loves much. I mean, there's so much that God has to say about forgiveness in His Word. But also the flip side of this is boundaries. So how do you protect yourself from being used and reused and used over and over again. Boundaries are a good thing, to set up healthy boundaries. Forgiveness still allows for a healthy distance between you and danger. There's a story, a pretty fascinating story that came out in the news just in the last couple of weeks. There's a story in India, a small town in India, where a wild male elephant, got loose on the streets and in the alleys. It was February 10th, here 2016, and left behind a trail of startled people, so you can imagine, damaged structures, trampled cars, smashed motorbikes. The panicked adult male elephant was soon cornered in a marketplace, and it was shot with a tranquilizer dart by the wildlife staff. And they eventually were able to elevate it onto a truck and transport it back to a forest where it was released, thankfully, without anybody being hurt. This just happened here in the last couple weeks. But can you imagine being one of those people? You stay there a couple weeks in and you're just kind of walking through the streets, all of a sudden this massive elephant just breaks through into the street and starts trampling everything and causing all kinds of damage. It's a good thing that a wild elephant is not loose in the busy city streets because it causes damage. It's okay, but it's good in its place out in the forest where it's meant to be, but it's good that there's a safe and healthy distance between the two, and the two shouldn't cross, and if they do, they're separated. It's not, and so here's the point. It's not bad to set up healthy boundaries in your life. And you're going to have to discern, get advice, and pray through what that looks like. But if you're in a situation where you've been used over and over again, and to figure out and to negotiate that, it's different. It's different if it's in a marriage relationship and how you work that out together and stay together through that. It's different if you're in a boss-employee relationship and you're being used and taken advantage of, and you might need to look for a different job. And there's different ways that you got to figure that out in your situation. And so there's a lot of depth to that. But creating boundaries is not wrong. In fact, it may be the next step. Jacob and Esau, there was some distance created between them. And time started to heal the wounds that were cut between these two brothers. And Jacob's off under his relative Laban, and he finds out, as you're going to see here in the remainder of this story, what it feels like to be used. He had used his brother to his advantage, and now he's about to be used. Let's pick up the story in Genesis chapter 29, verse 15. Genesis 29, verse 15, it says, "After Jacob had stayed with him, with Laban, for a whole month, Laban said to him, 'Just because you are a relative of mine, Jacob, just because you're a relative, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be.' Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel. After only a month, he's in love. It came quick for this guy. And it says that he's in love with Rachel. Verse 18, Jacob was in love with her, and he said, 'I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel.'" Now, ladies, is that not love? I mean, to the father, "I'll work for you 7 years." I mean, you just gotta find a guy now who'll be like, "I'll give you 7 minutes." All right, it's like, come on, that's awesome. Like 7 years. He's really in love. He is falling for this girl. He's like, "I will give you 7 years of my life for your daughter's hand in marriage." Verse 19, Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel. Check this out. All right, ladies, check this out. He stayed 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Woo! That's awesome. Man, they had it going on, right? 7 years seemed like a few days. Now that's when you know it's a real love relationship, right? It's like, man, just the time flew by. Now, opposite is also true. You know it's not going good. You've only been together like 7 weeks. You're like, it feels like a lifetime, you know? It's not good. Not good. But he's in love with her, right? I mean, he is in love with her. And he's like, "I'll work 7 years because I love Rachel." Verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, so he worked all these years, they seemed like a short time to him. He says, "Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her." Come on, don't tell me there's not any action in the Bible. All right, verse 22. So Laban brought together all the people of the place, and he gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah, and he brought her to Jacob. Not Rachel, not the one he loved, not the one he waited these 7 years and worked for. No, not at all. He brought Leah, the older daughter, to Jacob, and this is deceptive, and we don't know how this all went down. Maybe she was at a wedding, so maybe she had this veil. We don't know all what's going on, but he brings Leah, and Jacob made love to her. Verse 24. Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter and his attendant. Let's go on verse 26. Verse 25, when morning came, there was Leah. Now that's a surprise. Don't ask me how all this happened. Does it happen at night? I have no idea. But he finds out this is Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Laban replied, "It's not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work." Wow, imagine that situation. Do you think your family has drama? It's like, whoo, I would not want to touch that. He was deceived just like he was deceived. Now he's on the other end of it. Remember how he deceived his brother and he deceived his father? Now he's been deceived and he's on the other end of the stick. He feels used. See, it's not a big deal when you use somebody else, right? I mean, you don't see the perspective when you use somebody else. You don't feel like it's that big of an issue. But then when you get used, oh man, now it's on. Now it's a big deal. And this is how we operate. We don't realize that every time someone gets used, somebody gets hurt. Somebody feels underloved. It's damaging. So a secret in life is if you can put yourself in someone else's shoes. And you can see from their perspective. And you can start to ask yourself, what's best for them? What do they need? What's God's heart for them in this moment? The story goes on. Read one more part of this down in verse 30. And I'll encourage you, if you're not reading the Bible right now, we challenge people often to read the Bible every day. Jump into Genesis is a great book to read. It's full of amazing stories. Just pick it, read it chapter 2 or 3 a day, you'll get into it. There's a lot of good truth in here. The story goes on in verse 30. Jacob makes love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. You know, he'd waited for 7 years. It makes sense. I mean, he loved Rachel. But now he's been given, and this wasn't too uncommon in their culture. He had multiple wives. He had Leah and Rachel. They were both his wives, and in that culture, his responsibility to care for them and to have a family and all this stuff. This was his duty now. And it says that he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. Verse 31, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved. That's kind of sad, isn't it? She didn't ask for all this, but this is Dad's orchestrating her dad Laban's plan, and now she's in this home with this guy, but he really loves her sister, and it's just like, what's going on? But it says that God saw this. God's heart is breaking for Leah. See, she was not loved. He enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. And there's so much more to the story you can go on and read, but here's the point. Jacob loved Rachel. Leah felt underloved. She was tolerated. Maybe that's how some feel in this room. You feel tolerated. You don't feel loved. You don't feel cared for. God cares for you. And God sees you in your loneliness. God sees you in your hurt, in your disappointment. God sees you when you've been taken advantage of, and his heart is for you. And it breaks for you just like your heart breaks, and he's with you. And he noticed Leah. He noticed that she was not loved. And he cared for Leah. Because here's the problem. This is what breaks God's heart. It's in your notes. Using someone causes them to feel underloved. Using somebody causes them to feel underloved. And this is when you notice your life starts to really change, is when you start to see that from God's heart. And that breaks your heart. You think, man, I want people to feel loved. And I want to do as it says in Romans chapter 12, verse 10. So good. Romans 12, verse 10. It says, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. You know, I want to live the kind of life that helps others feel loved, genuinely feel loved. The love, not just my love, more importantly, the Father's love, that they're cared for by someone, connecting God with his kids. I mean, what a better mission could we have to help people be reunited with their Father? But you know, that's not the way of our world. The way of our world is to use people, and when they're no longer of use to you, to get rid of them. Check out this story. It was in the news just recently. Perhaps you heard it.
A murder plot foiled and exposed by the would-be assassins. A guy in Australia paid a group of hitmen, allegedly, to kill his wife while she was in Africa. She survived and surprised her husband by showing up at her own funeral. Crime-Siders Graham Cates has been looking into this story. Okay, start with the plot in the beginning.
This goes back just about a year. Noella Rukundo had traveled from Australia to Burundi for a funeral. A member of her family had died, and her husband stayed back in Australia. After the funeral, she goes back to her hotel room. She's mourning, she's sad, and he calls her and says, you know, why don't you go and get some fresh air? What she didn't know at the time was he had actually hired hitmen, and one of them was waiting outside this hotel. So she goes outside, this guy comes and points a gun at her and says, don't scream or I'm going to kill you, get in the car. She gets in this car and they drive her about half an hour. She's in the middle of Burundi. She doesn't know where she is. And at some point, they start asking her, why does this guy want to kill you? And she says, I don't know who you're talking about. Who wants to kill me? And so they put on the speakerphone her husband, and she hears her husband say, kill her. Now, they hang up the phone. She gets to this building where they had taken her, and they say, you know what? We're actually not going to kill you. Here's the thing. We don't kill women and children. They keep in mind, they're not saying we don't kill.
We're going to take money, but...
Yeah, they don't say we don't kill. We don't kill women and children. So they hold her for 2 days, and they actually extort some extra money from her husband. He ends up paying 7,000 Australian dollars to kill her. And eventually they let her go, and they let her go with evidence to kind of convict him. There's recordings of him hiring them. There's receipts for money he paid. And they give her a cell phone, too, so she can get back to where she needs to go. And I should add, this was based on reporting from the BBC, Australian newspapers, and the Washington Post.
Okay, so she finds out her husband has plotted to kill her and paid a bunch of money to hitmen who turn out to have a conscience. She flies back to Australia, and she gets the authorities involved.
Right. So the first thing she does is she actually waits outside of the memorial service funeral that was going on for her when she got there. The way it worked in the community they lived in was that basically people kind of file in and out of the house and give some money as donation to the husband over the course of a day. When this is all over, he walks outside and sees her, and she says he walked up to her like she was a ghost and touched her on the shoulder to make sure she was real, and then was like, I'm so sorry. But she's already contacted police, and once they got involved, at first he was saying, I didn't do it. So they got her to call him on the phone and kind of trick him into confessing on the phone. And then when he was shown the recorded confession, he actually pled guilty.
Okay, so it's a done deal now. Why did he want her killed?
Reportedly, and he denies this, they say that he was afraid she was going to leave him for another man.
Oh, fear can be a powerful, motivating factor, but my goodness, can you imagine he thinks that she's dead? He goes to her funeral, he's entertaining the mourners, and he goes outside and she's standing right there?
Standing right there.
Amazing, amazing.
So you just shake your head and be like, unbelievable? It's like, that people would do that to each other? But you're not serving my needs anymore, and so I just get rid of you. And as crazy as that story is, and legit as it is, unbelievably, that happens every week. Not that exact story, of course, but it happens in your life and in mine. We use someone, and when they don't meet our needs anymore, we move on, and they don't meet whatever agenda we have. We move on, and it's a sad state that Philippians 2:21, to circle back where we started, says this. It says, for everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But here's the amazing thing. It doesn't have to be that way for you and I. It doesn't have to be that way in this community. It doesn't have to be that way in your home. It can be different. And here's the vision. What would it look like if you and I no longer lived for our own interests, that we use people and see them as expendable and what they can do for us, but instead we switch that? We said, all right, God, I want to be on your agenda. And I want you to use me to benefit others. And I'm just going to be kind of like an open vessel. And God, you just flow your love through me. And I'm not perfect, and I'm going to screw up from time to time. But God, I just think it would be awesome, and there's no greater adventure I could be on than for you just to work through me, to bless and benefit and encourage others, and to see others experience life in you, Jesus, and ultimately, hopefully, to see some come to know you and to be changed and to have their eternity, they're forever changed because they come to know the saving and forgiving power of Jesus in their life. There's nothing greater than that. So Jesus, I want to be on your team. I want to look out for your interests and not mine. And that's my hope, is that we'll see a community of us who say, you know what? I'm in. I'm all in. Then we do it together. Then it's even more fun, and we get to be on God's team and raising this world to be to a different way, to a different operating system, to a way of viewing others that doesn't look out for our own interests, but looks out for God's. Right on? Come on, say it with conviction. Right on? Come on, let's pray together.
We hope you got a lot out of today's teaching and will be able to apply it to your everyday life. Again, if you'd like to learn more, get connected, or begin to give financially, just check out the link below. Thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you real soon.